Tall Boy's Son, Chapter 11, Excerpt. Riza was the only one who turned to acknowledge Sol and Pibble's arrival. She showed Sol her stained teeth. It was the smile of a shark, and it made his insides quiver. He hadn't seen her since boarding the ship because she was on the same shift as Trudy. Nonetheless, he remembered her introduction. Pilot, navigator, weapons. Maybe it was just the caffeine hit, but a premonition told him that weapons were about to be relevant. He returned her smile as if courtesy might calm the predator. Trudy and Barrett were engaged in an intense conversation, jargon flying between them. 2.219 above the elliptic, Barrett reported. Confirm. Cold silent, Trudy said. Green across the board. Heat levels normal. Target brightness 12 watts. Laying out the welcome mat, huh? Intercept is set. Confirm distance and velocity. 40 clicks, closing at .1. Then Trudy sighed with something like relief. She finally turned to him. Welcome to the bridge, Sol. I wanted you to see what we do. There was an energy behind her words. When they were kids, she had boasted that her birthday was coming up, but he still had to wait most of a year for his. She was that kind of excited right now. Sol was glad to see her, but he couldn't bring himself to say so. I thought you were going to keep me in the dark and feed me shit. The caffeine turned his tone sharp. Not anymore. Barrett talked me down. She smiled at her second in command. Sol thought he saw the legless man blush, which was too absurd for his mind to process. Trudy pointed at a display panel. We're coming up on our target. We intimidate them just a little. They drop some cargo, we pick it up, everyone goes their separate ways. Fire no guns. Shed no tears, Barrett intoned. Trudy tilted her head in a half shrug. It's not exactly honest work, but it's a living. Okay. Sol wasn't sure what she was expecting of him. Barrett spoke up, his voice rich with righteous anger. Interest can weather the loss. Won't even budge the needle on their margins. Profits that should belong to working folk. Sol looked back and forth between Trudy and Barrett. Barrett's justification sounded rehearsed, but Sol didn't need a reason. As far as he was concerned, Trudy's crew, himself included, were poor enough to take what they needed to survive. Presumably, some of this money would go to Gav, Hope, and Kimberlyn. That was more than enough justification for him. What am I supposed to do? Pibble clapped him on the back. You and me sit back, relax, and wait for something to break. Sol and Pibble strapped into the acceleration chairs at the back of the bridge. A display screen on a mechanical arm angled in front of Sol. He tapped the screen's controls and brought up a view of the target. One of the Basura's telescopes zoomed in on a ship shaped like a sea clamp. The mouth of the sea gripped a bundle of rectangular cargo containers. Behind that, pill-shaped fuel pods ringed the ship's base above a cluster of conical thruster nozzles. A crisp corporate logo of a golden sun rising over a fertile plains emblazoned the sides of the cargo containers. Sol's fingertips tingled. They were about to steal from one of the major interests. The caffeine nebulizer was redundant. He couldn't have been more alert. Secure helmets, Barrett ordered. Depressurizing in 10. He counted down. At 0, the ambient noise was sucked away, leaving Sol with the sound of his own breathing and the crew's voices buzzing from the tinny speakers in his helmet. God's eye in position, said Cajun. Acknowledged. Stand by, Trudy replied. Strapped into the chair, Sol glanced around as best he could, but the big-headed man didn't appear to be on the bridge. Pibble answered his unspoken question. Cajun find the dizzy. Extra set of eyes and ears for us. Oh, Sol said with more calm than he felt. His hands curled around an imaginary flight stick. He pictured himself piloting the Dizzy. He knew from Star Jockey that it was a very responsive ship. "A little more than eyes and ears," Trudy said. Sol could only see the back of her spacesuit, but a smile was apparent in her voice. An explosion flashed, silent in the depths of space. An actinic blue light flashed, flicking long shadows across the cargo ship. Sparks lodged in the larger vessel's hull, twinkling lights that looked like shattering glass. Electromagnetic pulse darts. Cajun must have fired the EMP into the path of the cargo ship. If they worked the same as in Star Jockey, the cargo ship would be disabled, at least until they swapped out some cooked circuit boards and reset their breakers. "Reactor powered, venting heat," Barrett said, his voice rising with excitement. "They can see us." The basura rumbled beneath Sol. The sound rose through his seat and shook his bones. "Opening the channel," Trudy announced. Then, projecting her voice as if speaking to an auditorium, "Cargo carrier, if you reboot your systems or attempt to flee, you will be fired upon. Safe passage can be purchased with a toll of 1,200 cubic meters of cargo. You have 30 seconds to comply. Over." Sol caught himself holding his breath with anticipation and consciously began his breathing exercises. Static crackled across the open channel for one cycle of in-breaths and out-breaths. Finally, an unfamiliar man's voice replied. "This is Captain Souther of the Old Reliable. We have 3 contracts on our scopes. Are you seeing the same? Over." That wasn't compliance. Though the bridge had been evacuated of air, Sol felt tension in the silence. Riza fidgeted with her restraints. "Reliable, we have a Dizzy 328R in escort position." Trudy's voice lacked the confidence she'd projected before. Something was wrong, but Sol didn't understand what. Captain Souther's voice came back, urgent and angry. "Negative. I'm telling you there's another. You, me, your Dizzy, and a 4th contact. And it ain't ours." "Give me eyes," Trudy ordered. "Boosting scanners," Barrett responded. The captain of the Old Reliable didn't wait for a response. "This is not standard procedure. We are powering up." "No!" Trudy yelled. "You can't." "Fuck you!" Sol's heart pounded. What the hell was going on? He jabbed at the interface on his console, searching through the view options. He found one that abstractly represented the 3 ships, the Basura, Dizzy, and Old Reliable, as points in space with primary color lines and circles indicating vectors, distances, and orientations. The view updated, zooming outward and blinking with a 4th point of light, its vector stabbing straight through the narrow triangle of the other ships. Barrett called out, "I've got the 4th!" Sol tapped the point of light. The console switched to a close-up. The newcomer was frigate class, much bigger than the Basura. Not as big as the cargo carrier, but designed for violence. The frigate was lopsided. On one half, radiator arrays poked between hull plating like weeds growing from the cracks in a sidewalk. On the opposite side, smooth stretches of armor were interrupted by the scorch and scratch of battle scars. It wasn't a common ship, or he would have recognized it instantly. Then a distinctive shape caught his eye. Silhouetted against the splash of the Milky Way was a Corvette starfighter perched atop a docking pylon. It was hard to tell in the harsh, color-consuming light, but the Corvette's paint cast its dark form toward the purple, as if its true color was red. A chill ran through him. There's no way. But who else could it be? Who else flew a cherry-red Corvette but the legend himself? The one-man war. The infamous quadruple ace, Gilbert Bain. Soul felt weirdly torn between celebrity awe and the fear that he was about to die. Perhaps he could get an autograph before the legend blasted them all to pieces. The displays went white, bright enough to cast shadows across the bridge. The incoming ship vanished behind a blaze of braking thrust. Riza emitted a stream of expletives that could have peeled paint. Soul gripped the armrests of his chair. Sweat stung cold where his spacesuit's fan blew air on his neck. Trudy hailed the ship. My sister just called Gilbert Bain, Soul's giddy brain pointed out. The voice it answered was distorted by the kind of modulator used by villains demanding ransom money. Stand down, Basura. Power down your reactor and prepare to be boarded. Gilbert Bain wasn't after the cargo ship. He was after the Basura. But that didn't make sense. The Basura didn't have any cargo. It was running empty to make room for what they should have, at this very moment, been stealing. There was only one thing of value on board. Panic surged through Soul. He grabbed for his pocket. His gloved fingers scraped against the fabric of his spacesuit. Then he remembered that the data stick was secured to the foot of his bunk. He should do something. But what? It was much too late for confessions. A knot in his throat kept him from speaking. He would have killed for some liquid courage. Cops? Riza asked. An icon of a slash through a megaphone indicated that she spoke on a private internal channel. No, Barrett growled. A pirate. It's Gilbert Bain, Soul blurted. But any reaction to that revelation was overshadowed by Barrett calling out, Incoming fire! Trudy shouted orders. 30 degrees, port, 10 arc seconds to the ecliptic. Hard burn. Cajun, get your ass back here. This is my fault, Soul thought. Sweat stung the corners of his eyes. He clamped his mouth shut. The time for truth had passed. Then speaking was impossible. Acceleration slammed him. His skin stretched taut against his skull. His vision blurred as a force compressed the jelly of his eyeballs. The tip of his nose bent toward his right cheek. Weapons fire, Riza asked, her tone flattened by the subvocal throat mic that made speech possible at high Gs. Return fire, Trudy replied with the same robotic enunciation. A chattering demonic laugh reverberated through the hull. Saul recognized the sound of coil gunfire from Star Jockey, but this was no game. The vibration wasn't coming from innocuous little motors in his chair, and the dimming of his vision wasn't simulated on a screen. Acceleration, like an invisible assailant holding a cushion over his face, smothered him where he sat. Then the pressure relented. He gasped. His stomach cartwheeled. The Basura swung evasively. Acceleration body slammed him again. The mechanical arm holding his console bent ominously. The hard-edged screen dangled in front of his face. He couldn't have lifted a hand to move the console if he'd wanted to. His arm was a pile of bricks. He was helpless. And somewhere out there, beyond the narrow walls of the tin coffin of a ship, coil gun fire flew. Depleted uranium penetrator cores were wearing magnetized jackets pierced the void. They could strike at any moment. He'd be dead before he knew it. A bump. The acceleration ceased. The hell choir of coil gun fire dropped to a solo. We're hit, Barrett reported. I lost a gun, Riza said. Fuel leak too, Barrett said. Soul's eyes jumped about. His hands gripped the chair helplessly. Then Pibble was grabbing him by the collar of his suit. I got the fuel leak, you fix the gun. Oh, and hold on, ship's gonna keep dancing. What if I can't fix it? Soul cringed as the words left his mouth. If they all died, at least he'd be spared further embarrassment. Pibble's expression was haggard, the way he always looked. You're a mechanic. fix the problem or hit it with a blunt object and pray. Sol nodded vigorously. He kept his mouth closed, not trusting what might come out. He unstrapped and pulled himself over the shoulder of his chair, following Pibble down the hatch in the floor of the bridge.